A very warm welcome to all the distinguished guests and excellencies in our special program today, Music for Healthy People and a Healthy Planet. We are indeed grateful to have your presence here today. A very special welcome to our chief guest, Her Excellency, Mrs. Catherine Kivi, Ambassador of Estonia to India, and to Mr. Ricky Cage, Grammy Award winner and UN Ambassador, who is our speaker for the day. Before we begin the program, we'd like to share a brief about Rtambhara Wellness. We are a collective of like-minded individuals who are driven by a passion to achieve human wellness and well-being through a holistic approach. With this intent in mind, we conduct corporate programs and group retreats for wellness that help empower oneself through self-discovery and personal transformation to unlock one's true potential. If you resonate with what we are doing and would like to be part of our community, then please connect with us. Our contact details are posted on the chat. A small request before we start, may I ask everyone to stay muted through the talk and to please keep their videos on. It's very interesting to see who all are here, so please keep your videos on. Today's session will be for 75 minutes. Her Excellency will present the opening speech, followed by the main talk by Mr. Ricky Cage on a very relevant topic, music for healthy people and a healthy planet. There will be a Q&A session after the talk. Please feel free to post your questions using the chat function, but please ensure that you post it to everyone and not an individual, your question. May I now call on our Director Operations, Mr. Rohan Nayak, to do the introduction of our chief guest, Her Excellency, Mrs. Catherine Kivi.
Thank you, Beenaji. Hello, everyone. I have the proud privilege to introduce Her Excellency, Ms. Catherine Kivi. Ms. Catherine Kivi has been the ambassador of the Republic of Estonia to India since August 2019. While residing in Delhi, she is concurrently also accredited to Singapore, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Nepal. It is interesting to mention that during 2020 and 2021, Estonia is a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. As India will join in 2021 for the next 2 years, our two countries will work together and give their utmost for the global peace. Both Estonia and India provides importance to preserving the environment and raising awareness about the clear link between the climate change and security issues, which is among Estonian priorities during our tenure in the Security Council. May I request the Honorary Consul of Estonia and Managing Director of Rtambhara Wellness, Mr. Praveen Goenka, to please welcome Her Excellency.
Thank you very much, Rohan. I extend a very warm welcome to all the distinguished guests and honorable colleagues representing many great nations. Thank you so much for your presence. I have the proud privilege to invite Her Excellency, Ambassador of Estonia, Ms. Catherine Kivi, to please present the opening speech as our chief guest. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Namaste, dear audience. It's a great pleasure to address you today, especially as ambassador of a singing nation. What does it mean? You will know at the end of my address. Because sometimes war are won not with tanks and guns, they are won just with pure human determination for freedom. The history of wars knows only few revolutions where the transition from oppression or occupation to the restoration of independence and freedom was peaceful. These revolutions were often given some very special names or specific names. I'm sure you have heard something about the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia or the Revolution of Roses in Georgia or the Orange Revolution in Ukraine. They later had still some casualties, unfortunately, but there is only one single revolution in the history of humankind without any casualties, without any single death, without any human losses. And this is called the singing revolution, and it happened in Estonia. To understand how something similar could produce, I have to tell you shortly the story of the singing festivals in Estonia. Namely, every 5 years, since already 1869, Estonians are gathering tens of thousands singers to sing together, and these festivals are called laulupidu. Can you imagine roughly 20,000 to 30,000 singers with audience of more than 1,000 people, 100,000 people, nearly a tenth of our population? We are quite famous of singing together and practicing the choral singing. And this tradition is also listed now by UNESCO as oral and intangible heritage. But even before and much before 1869, our ancestors, our grandmothers and grandparents used to sing the past experiences to the next generation, not like a traditional classical storytelling or poetry telling, but in singing, because at that time we didn't know how to write and read. And these centuries-old songs about harvest and happiness, marriage and death, about 4 seasons and everyday life, they have also been registered by UNESCO, and they are now today part of intangible cultural heritage of humankind. Dear audience, I would say that collective singing runs in Estonian blood, and it is part of our DNA. During the occupation time, the Soviets still believed that the singing festivals could be a great opportunity to push their propaganda. And this is why we were allowed to continue and keep this tradition and to gather again every 5 years. Last year it was 2019, and next time in 24. So we were allowed to continue singing, but of course we were asked to sing rather Soviet songs and not our patriotic folk songs. But especially at the end of 80s, the singers at the end of the official program didn't leave the scene. They stayed there and they started to sing songs, national songs, which everyone knew by heart. And the nomenclatura, which was partly participating among singers or among audience, they didn't have any other choice to join the crowd and to sing. And how could you use weapons or artillery against people singing peacefully? So I think these songs have disarmed completely the adversaries, and this collective singing in between 87 and 91 was called later on the singing revolution, because also a part of these festivals, people started to gather occasionally, quite spontaneously sometimes, and sing together until we could form together with Latvia and Lithuania in August 1989 so-called Baltic Way or human chain, Baltic chain of freedom. This freedom chain consisting more than 2 million people across the 3 countries, and it spanned over 419 miles and connected every citizen between the capitals of the 3 Baltic states, Tallinn, Riga, and Vilnius. It was the end of Soviet era and the start of a process which luckily ended in August 91, and in Estonia with without any single casualty. And last year in New Delhi, we were happy to celebrate this event together with the anniversary of the birth of Mahatma Gandhi, who was also a great advocate for non-violent freedom movement. But there is something more between Estonia and India I would highlight here. And let's leave here the politics and hard memories and focus rather on something which help us to understand the role of music and singing in Estonia, because we really believe that this tradition has helped us to keep calm and cool while the tanks appeared on the streets to squash our spirit. It had just empowered us to protest peacefully and not to lose patience. Because if you are singing together, it's like practicing yoga. You have the same breathing, and it gives like, if you are doing in a group, it will synchronize you, what you are doing. And this singing tradition and common breathing, it has helped us to keep hope and not to lose hope in a good future, which we finally are happy to share today. I'm very excited to hear more our chief guest, Mr. Ricky Cage, telling us about other beneficial issues related with music and singing. But those who want to know more about Estonian story of singing revolution, you can Google just a documentary, The Singing Revolution, and you will get a very good in-depth story about it. How a nation can make a revolution just by singing and smiling. And I hope this spirit will prevail also in nowadays hard times, and it helps really to overcome hard times. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I'm happy to give the floor to the main guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Her Excellency. We thank you for the opening speech and reckon you, Madam, for your commitment to wellness and your conviction of music being an integral medium which unifies people. At Rtambhara, we also place great emphasis on arts, culture, and music, since we believe there is a seamless sync to this practice and our inner higher selves. And here, we have a direct synergy with our speaker tonight, Mr. Ricky Cage. Mr. Ricky Cage is a Grammy Award winner, US Billboard #1 artist, UNESCO ambassador, and UNICEF celebrity supporter. He is an internationally renowned music composer, environmentalist, and professor. Ricky has dedicated his life and music to creating awareness on the environment and positive social impact. He has performed in over 30 countries, including United Nations headquarters. Mr. Ricky Cage composed and produced the album Shanti Samsar, which was launched by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and French President Francois Hollande at the United Nations Conference in Paris. May I request you, Mr. Ricky Cage, to honor us with your much eagerly awaited talk.
Hello, everyone. And I assume that everybody can hear me. So hello, everyone. Namaste. It's great to be here. And of course, see all of you virtually. I'm usually used to doing this with a lot of feedback and, and people talking back and hearing everybody and watching everybody's faces. But today I'm going to be just staring at a camera and delivering the speech and just imagining that everybody is listening to me. So thank you. But anyway, thank you so much for having me over here. It's a huge honor for me to be here on this platform. And thank you so much for that amazing speech, Catherine. And I think a few mics need to be muted. So anyway, so talking about this particular topic that I'm going to be speaking about today, that is music for a healthier planet and healthier people. I wanted to dive down a little deeper into my own career and my own journey of music and the environment. So I'll start off very young, as a child in school, in my second or third grade. I was always very fascinated by music, and I was very fascinated by sound. My ears were always more important than my eyes. While my classmates were quite fascinated by television and by cartoons and by video games, I was obsessed with my music system, and I would basically listen to music all day long. During those days, there were cassette tapes, so I would listen to cassette tapes all day long. I would listen to music, try to decipher which instruments I used in every song, try to understand the culture behind every single instrument, what every musician was thinking about when they created the music or when they wrote the lyrics. So I was pretty much obsessed with music, and that's how most of my childhood went by. And it was through music that I found a very deep connect with nature. So it's very difficult for me to explain, but for me, music and nature has always been one and the same. It's not two entities, it's always one and the same. And through music, I found a very deep connect with nature, as I mentioned, and I was quite a weird child while growing up, because while my siblings and my family used to run away from seemingly dangerous animals like snakes and rats and lizards and things like that, I was very drawn towards them. And I would try to look into the eyes of these animals, and I would try to find, personality in every single animal. And during those days, I would try to figure out, what kind of music do these animals like. But that's what. So I was quite a weird child, and while growing up, and admittedly, and of course now I can explain why. I feel that music and nature is one and the same, because at the end of the day, how did music start? Music started off as sounds from within nature. Sounds of the birds, sounds of the animals, sounds of the river flowing, sounds of the rain, sounds of raindrops on leaves, sounds of the wind. And then later on, humans started imitating those sounds and trying to make it more pleasing for the human ear. And then later on, we started taking objects from within nature and making musical instruments out of them, like, bamboo flutes and, animal skin as percussion instruments, boxes of seeds, bowls of water, and things like that. And it's only for the last few 100 years or maybe 1,000 years that music has actually become academic, with notes and scales and rags and things like that. But actually, music and nature is one and the same. And our indigenous populations all over the world, whether it's the Indian indigenous populations or it's First Nations or in various countries, they basically are living proof that music and nature has always been one and the same, because even now, they actually, pretty much all the music that they perform is about nature, and it is about imitating sounds of nature. So then, cut through a few years, and as all of us in India, all of us Indians know on the call, all of us Indians know that, that it's in our 12th grade that we have to make a very strong decision as to what we want to do for the rest of our lives, And so I had made a very strong decision that I wanted to be a musician for the rest of my life. I wanted music to be my hobby, my profession, my bread and butter. I wanted to do music till the day I die, basically. And I went to my father, my parents. So my father, who's a second generation doctor, I went to him and I told him that, Dad, I want to be a musician for the rest of my life. And he looked at me as if I was absolutely crazy. And so he was basically waiting for the punchline, because he's like, music is not a profession. Music can be a hobby. What are you going to do for your life? Because you can't be doing music for the rest of your life. So then, after a lot of heartache and a lot of pushing and pulling and a lot of fighting, we decided that I would finish off a degree in dental surgery. And once I finish off that degree in dental surgery, my life was my own, and I could do whatever I wanted for the rest of my life. So that's exactly what I did. So I went to college for 5 years. I pursued a dental degree. And of course, in the evenings, I would be doing music professionally, but I would go to college and things like that. And at the end of 5 years, I did not know anything in dentistry, but I got a degree in dental surgery, which is pretty much a testimony to the education system nowadays. So I got my degree. I very ceremoniously went to my father. I gave him the degree certificate, and I told him that, that you can keep this. I'm not going to practice for a single day, even though dentistry is a very noble profession. It's not for me. I want to be a musician. So that's what started off my full time into music, because I was already doing music professionally while I was in college, but now I could dedicate my life, from morning to evening, or every single waking minute of my day to music. Now, if I have to digress a little bit, since we are talking about wellness over here, I do not blame my father, obviously, for making me do a degree for 5 years which I would never use for the rest of my life, because I understand that, that my parents based their decisions on fear, in the sense that they were fearful that, that I would not be successful. They were fearful that, that I would not get married into a good family, or they were fearful that I would starve for the rest of my life, or what would they tell their relatives as to what I do for a living. Whereas my decisions were always based on passion. So there were two differences over there. Now imagine that after I got that degree and, I held that degree in my hand, and I would think that, okay, maybe I might not be successful as a musician. So maybe if I was fearful, and I would think that I would not be successful, so let me just open up a clinic and let me go there from 9 to 5 and let me do music in the evening. And let me treat patients from 9 to 5 and make some money and all of that stuff, because it's a clear traditional career path to making money. Then I would go to a clinic. I would open up the clinic at 9 o'clock. I would be treating patients the whole day. So, and all that I would be doing while I'm doing these procedures on my patients, all that I would be thinking about is, when can I go back home and, and play on my musical instruments, or play on my guitar, or compose some music. So in that kind of a situation, being a frustrated professional, would any of you on this Zoom call like to come to me to get a surgical procedure done? Would any of you like to come to me to get a tooth extraction done? Obviously not, So it's very important not to be a frustrated professional, and it's very important to love what you do, whatever you do. So, because that is what wellness is all about, loving what you do and living the life, that you want to live. So, yeah, anyway, coming back to my story. So I started off my musical profession, and I started off doing commercials for television and radio. So I was doing these jingles and commercials, the music for commercials on television and radio. And in a span of about 13 years, I managed to be quite successful. I managed to do more than 3,000 commercials, almost 3,500 commercials for various brands all over the world. I was doing music for brands like Levi's, Lee, McDonald's, Burger King, Air India, Lufthansa, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Airtel, Vodafone, you name the brand and their competitor, I was basically making music for them all over the world. And then it sort of struck me after doing this for about 12 or 13 years that these big brands have understood the power of music. They've understood the power of music so much so that they're ready to pay me a few $1,000s to create a piece of music to sell their product, because they always want to sell a product. So they're ready to pay me a couple of $1,000s to create a piece of music to sell their product. And not only that, they're ready to spend a few $1 million to actually air this music on television and radio. So they have understood the power of music, that music is a really powerful language, not only to communicate a message, but also to retain that message deep into the consciousness of a listener. The songs that we learned during our childhood are songs that we remember forever. The jingles that we love are jingles that always stick with us. And whenever we think about the brand, we always think about the music behind that brand. So that is pretty much the power of music. And then I realized that I, being a musician, have not understood the power of music, whereas these big brands have understood the power of music, and they're harnessing the power of music on a daily basis. So that is when I decided that I'm going to stop all forms of commercial music, and I'm only going to concentrate on making music about social impact. So in other words, every single piece of music that comes out of my head, or comes off my fingers, or comes out of my studio is going to be about making this world a better place in my own small way, and I'm going to stop all other forms of music. Now, in going into that journey, so that was my second journey into music. So in going into that journey, I'm going to share my screen now, because I think y'all are sick and tired of seeing my face. So what I'll do is that I'll show you some other visuals now. Let me just figure out how to do this. Just give me a second. Yes. So I'm assuming that y'all can see music for the planet on the screen. If y'all cannot, then somebody can just turn on your mic and tell me about it.
We can see it.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So basically, to start off my journey, I met this amazing flute player from South Africa, a gentleman called Wouter Kellerman. I was a huge fan of his music. He was a huge fan of my music. We met in Los Angeles, and we were trying to figure out as to, how do we work with each other? How do we collaborate with each other? And then, we came across a huge coincidence that I had just finished making a piece of music on our father of the nation. That is Mahatma Gandhi, who Catherine just spoke about, in terms of, the nonviolence movement. And so I just finished making a piece of music on our father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. And the coincidence was that Wouter Kellerman had just finished making a piece of music on his father of the nation, that is Nelson Mandela. And we also realized that there's a whole lot of cross-pollination over here because, as we all know, Mahatma Gandhi spent his formative years in South Africa, so he had a lot of South Africanness in him. And Nelson Mandela was heavily inspired by the non-violence movement by Mahatma Gandhi, so he had a lot of Indianness in him. So we decided that this is how we'll work with each other. I'll send you my Indian music, you add South Africanness to it, and you send me a South African music, and I'll add some Indianness to it. So we traveled all over the world. We spent 2.5 years. We collaborated with musicians, and we created this album called Winds of Samsara. And this album was hugely successful. Unfortunately, it wasn't released in India because, as you know, in India, you have to be part of a movie to release music. But that's a conversation for a completely different topic and a completely different day. But nevertheless, it was released all over the world. It was #1 on the USA Billboard charts, which is a first for a person of Indian origin. It was pretty much the highest selling instrumental album of that particular year worldwide in 2004.
Hello? Can you hear me?
I think somebody's mic is muted. Yeah, unmuted. Yeah.
Hello?
So, hello. Anyway, that culminated with us winning the Holy Grail of Music Awards. That is the Grammy Award for that particular album, Winds of Samsara. So this is some pictures from the award ceremony, and. Then after I won the Grammy Award, I was invited by our Honorable Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, for a quick meeting, which was supposed to be like a 10-minute meeting, which I thought would be just a photo op. And of course, that itself was a huge honor because from about being an individual from a country of 1.3 billion people, it was quite amazing that the Prime Minister of the country actually calls you for a meeting. And so I attended the meeting, and it ended up being an hour-long philosophical discussion, and a very casual philosophical discussion where we discussed about the environment, we discussed about music, and he spoke about his thoughts about the environment and his thoughts about environmental protection. And, and he also told me about the fact that that particular year in 2015, he was going to visit the climate change conference in Paris, the COP21. That was pretty much the biggest ever conference of nations, 195 nations participating, and every single nation coming together to understand what can all of us do together to mitigate the effects of climate change and to reduce our carbon emissions so that we have a better future for our children and our children's children. So he told me that he's going to be delivering the keynote speech at that particular conference. And then that is when both of us just looked at each other and we thought that, all right, let's make an album, let's make some music. And he said that, the Honorable Prime Minister said that if I make an album that he likes, then he will actually launch it at the climate change conference. So that was pretty much the energy that I needed. And so then I made an album called Shanti Samsara, my world music for environmental consciousness. I collaborated with 500 musicians from over 40 countries. Everywhere in the world where I could find a musician that felt as strongly as me about the environment, I just collaborated with them. Like, these are some pictures of all the collaborations. We collaborated with musicians, like you can see, Annie Choing Drolma from Nepal, from Tibet, from Peru, from Azerbaijan, from Turkey. You can see Mr. Amitabh Bachchan in the corner. Then collaborated with musicians, the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra in London, musicians from Canada, from China, from Israel, from Abbey Road Studios in London, Vietnam, from Ghana. And that culminated with our Honorable Prime Minister releasing the album at the Climate Change Conference. Since it happened in Paris, he released the album along with the then French President, François Hollande. And I went on to performing that album in more than 35 countries now, including 3 times now at the United Nations headquarters in Geneva. This is some pictures from the concert in Geneva at the UN headquarters. This is a picture of the concert from the UN headquarters in New York, our performance over there. And so coming back to the climate change conference that I spoke about, the COP21, just to repeat what I just said, it was the biggest ever climate change conference, biggest ever conference of nations anywhere in the world, with 195 countries participating. And every single country pretty much sent in their head of state, their president or prime minister. Our prime minister went, all the prime ministers of all the countries were there. And At that particular conference, one particular world leader who absolutely caught my attention was President Anote Tong of the island nation of Kiribati. Now, President Anote Tong went up on stage and he gave a very, very short speech and a very short presentation. It was just about 2 minutes. And all that he said when he went on stage was that all you 195 countries present over here, please pass a resolution. Please pass a resolution that ensures that my people of Kiribati stay above the water. Now, that was a very powerful statement and it quite shook me. And to be honest, and I'm really ashamed to say, that I hadn't even heard of this country, the Republic of Kiribati, let alone know about her disastrous fate or even know what this gentleman was talking about. So I studied about Kiribati and I realized that Kiribati is a country pretty much in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, so it's quite isolated in the South Pacific, 21 inhabited islands, very low-lying atoll islands, and they are going to be the first country in the world. They're said to be the first country in the world that is going to go completely underwater due to climate change. Now, they are already seeing the effects of climate change. Already villages are being evacuated, islands are being evacuated, but they are going to be the first country in the world to go completely underwater. And during our lifetime rather, the tallest point in any of the islands is going to be completely submerged underwater, which means that we're going to have to redo our maps and our globes, because the part where Kiribati is on our maps and globes, we're going to have to paint it in blue, because they're just going to disappear from the face of the earth. So here are some pictures of the island nation of Kiribati. Ironically, a heart-shaped island over there. Beautiful, beautiful country. This is the capital, Tarawa. If you look at it, if you look at the picture very closely, on your right-hand side, it looks like it's shallow water, and on the left-hand side, it's deep water. So you can see how the island has completely thinned out. And if you just think about it, a 4-foot wave could just wipe out the entire nation. It's that vulnerable right now. This is another island which is pretty much completely evacuated. This is another island which is on its way to evacuation. This is me with their president, with the ex-president Anote Tong. So yeah, so Kiribati is a very good example, because there's not much that we can do about Kiribati's fate right now, because they're definitely going underwater. And Kiribati is not at all at fault when it comes to climate change, because if you think about it, if all of our nations, all of us on this call, all of our nations, all our developed nations and developing nations, if all of us could, build domes around our borders, and keep our carbon emissions within our own borders, then countries like Kiribati have nothing to worry about, right? But the problem is that it's one atmosphere, and our carbon emissions become their carbon emissions, spreads around the world. Because of this, global temperatures rise, polar ice caps melt, ocean levels rise, and since they are low-lying islands, they are suffering the consequences of our actions. So I went to Kiribati, I spent some time over there, spent some time with their wonderful people. It's very difficult to get there, actually, if you study about it. And I realized that this is a country that lives completely within nature. It's a country that does not take from nature more than they can give back. They do not have much carbon emissions. In fact, almost zero carbon emissions, zero industrialization, but yet they are suffering the consequences of our actions. So this is what climate change is, that the people who are least at fault when it comes to climate change are the people who are suffering the most. And Kiribati is the best example of that. So Kiribati is a very, very good example of showcasing that climate change is absolutely real. Climate change is happening right now. There are current victims of climate change, and our actions sitting down over here in our countries are having disastrous consequences on people on the other side of the world. Now, moving on, I would like to, I'll stop sharing my screen now. Yeah. So moving on, I'd like to speak about, my screen is stopped sharing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So I'd like to speak about the word coexistence. Now, when we think about the word coexistence, or in India, we've got a beautiful Sanskrit phrase called Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which literally means the world is one family. So when we think about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, when we think about coexistence, the only thing that comes to our mind is basically living in coexistence with Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, Jews, Parsis, Buddhists, basically different parts of the human race. Because somewhere along our journey of being humans, we have absolutely forgotten that we are not the only species on this planet. We are just one among millions and millions of species on this planet. In fact, every single, every single culture, every single ancient culture, every single ancient civilization, every single ancient tradition on this planet has always defined coexistence as living in absolute peace and absolute harmony with every single entity on this planet, whether living or non-living. So basically, you're going a little further, where you're not just saying that you're coexisting with all human beings, but you're saying that you're not only saying that you're coexisting with all life, but you're also saying that you're coexisting with every single entity on this planet. So we have to coexist with the water we drink, with the air we breathe, with the land we walk on, and that's the only key to our survival. So I believe that that we as a society in India, we Indians, we've lived in coexistence with our environment, with our forests and wildlife in particular, for the longest period of time, because we revere our forests, we revere our wildlife, and we in fact pray to our forests and we pray to our wildlife. But then what happens is that because of growing human population, because of growing human greed, we have something known as human and animal conflict. And in particular, I'd like to speak more about human and elephant conflict, because that is something that I've been working on creating awareness on through my music. So elephants, being the largest walking mammals on this planet, need our protection. And in countries like India, we've got pretty much a warlike situation that is happening between humans and elephants. Even though we revere our elephants and we pray to elephants, we have this warlike situation happening with them. And as a lot of us must have read in the news a couple of months back, what happened, the tragic incident that happened with the elephant in Kerala. So basically, this warlike situation mainly happens because of deforestation, because of fragmentation of the elephant habitat, and and because of degradation of the elephant habitat. Now, when it comes to this elephant in Kerala, so I'm going to digress a little bit over here. What I'm going to talk about is that, what we hear in the news and what people talk about and what celebrities talk about is basically that, let's punish that guy in Kerala who did this. Let's find out the perpetrator and punish them. Kerala is no longer God's own country and all that stuff, which I find to be quite, if I may say so, it's quite hypocritical, simply because, the elephant walked out of his or her habitat simply because the forests were no longer good enough for the elephant. And we as urban dwellers, we feel so inconvenienced if we do not have electricity even for a couple of seconds. We feel so inconvenienced if we do not have the gadget that we need, or the gadget that we need is not available, or it's not being manufactured fast enough. And where do all these materials come from? Where does all the coal come from that we are using for our electricity? Where does all these metallic elements come from that we're using in our phones? It basically comes from the forest, and we're destroying. We are the ones who are responsible for destroying these forests. And because of this, the elephants need to move out of the forest to get their food or to even just walk around. And the people who are suffering are the poor villagers who are living on the fringes of these forests. So the elephants, and they are in a huge conflict where the elephants are causing damage to the humans' property and lives, and the humans are causing damage to the elephants' lives. And we are the ones who are causing this conflict. So just blaming the people who are living in the fringes of these forests and these people who have to do these really terrible things. And I reiterate, these things are really terrible that they're doing, that they have to do these absolutely terrible things to protect their families and to protect their livelihoods. And we are just blaming them when we need to look inwards. Anyway, enough of that. Sorry for digressing into that. But nevertheless, when we talk about coexistence and we talk about creating a more environmentally conscious society, a few years ago, after doing these concerts all over the world, I realized that, we need to start with the children. And if we do not start with the children, then we are not going to get anywhere with these efforts. So along with two friends of mine, that is Lonnie Park from New York and Dominic DeCruz from Bangalore, my own hometown, we wrote 27 songs for children. And it's my first time writing songs for children. So we wrote 27 songs for children based on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Now, as we all know, the United Nations has got these Sustainable Development Goals, which are really good, and they're very well written, and they've been signed off with all the member states, with all the 193 member states. Some of the goals are zero poverty, zero hunger, innovation, education, protecting life on land, protecting life underwater. You have climate action, so water, you have all these beautiful goals. So we took these goals, we took these seemingly complex topics, and we simplified them for children by writing these songs, which are pretty much like nursery rhymes. All these songs are very peppy, they're very energetic, they're very, I know it's a wrong word to use, but very infectious in terms of that if somebody listens to the song once, it will pretty much be stuck in their head. So we wrote these songs and we started a children's education movement called My Earth Songs, where we distributed the songs through the current education system through textbooks, particularly through Macmillan Publishers, through their textbooks. So currently we are in 4.9 million textbooks. These songs are in 4.9 million textbooks all over the world. So children learn these songs within their classrooms and, and within their homes. And we've had numerous schools tell us after these songs have been, passed on to the children. Like we've got songs on plastics, we've got songs on the rhinoceros, we've got songs on, on reducing garbage, on teaching children what a carbon footprint is, importance of trees. So we've had numerous schools tell us that, the schools itself were forced by the children to stop single-use plastics on the campus. Some children forced their schools to plant more trees, not to waste food, to do cleanup drives around the city, to do beach cleanups. And, and children are actually shaming their parents into action because of this particular movement. So what I'd like to say is that all these songs are available completely free of cost to anyone who wants to use them for educational or non-commercial purposes. They are in the public domain, so I would encourage everybody to use it if you are doing anything to do with education. The website is myearthsongs.com, and please use them for whatever purposes you want. And of course, Universal Music is now releasing this particular project as an album, where all the proceeds are going to be going to UNICEF's COVID relief efforts. Now, with so many problems that we are facing nowadays, so many problems, like especially the environmental problems, because those are the ones that I keep talking about. Like, for example, you have climate change, you have air pollution, you have plastics pollution, you have deforestation, you have species extinction. But I believe that the biggest threat to all of us is the constant thought that we have that somebody else will make a difference. We're always waiting for somebody else to make a difference. We are waiting for governments to make a difference, for leaders to make a difference, politicians to make a difference, intergovernmental bodies, NGOs, corporations to make a difference. When the truth is that the only way that we can bring about change is if we change ourselves. The most cliched and the most quoted Mahatma Gandhi statement is that be the change you want to see, and everybody keeps talking about it, everybody keeps quoting it. And it's a cliche because it's absolutely true that, that at the end of the day, what we need is behavioral change. And we need to empower not only ourselves, that we can make a difference and we can make incremental difference with just making a few changes in our lives, but we need to empower everybody around us that, if you just make a couple of changes in your life, then you can bring about huge change. So this is what I try to do through my concerts. Now I'll just share my screen again quickly. Yeah, thank you for your patience on that. So this is like, I'll just show you a couple of pictures of my concerts. So my concerts, I've always categorized them as two kinds. What I call the top-down approach and what I call the ground-up approach. So the top-down approach is concerts which I play intimate concerts to world leaders, to politicians, to business leaders, to Fortune 500 companies and things like that, where I talk about the environment through the emotional language of music, through beautiful visuals and things like that, and and try to inspire them to make a difference within their own lives. Because I've always believed that that it's very important to inspire people to make a difference rather than shaming people into action. Simply because if you inspire people through love and to make a difference, then that has a much more long-standing effort, and that's what I try to do through my music. So this is a concert that we did at the Vidhan Sauda. For those of you who know Bangalore, Bangalore has got the Legislative Assembly Hall, so we did a concert over there for our MLAs and MPs and our IS officers. This is another picture from there. This is a picture that I already showed you at the United Nations headquarters in Geneva. We did a concert to the world leaders, performed in Geneva twice now already. So as you can see, world leaders, their entourages and everybody, standing and appreciating the concert. This is, again, another picture that I showed you. Then this is an example of a concert with a ground-up approach. So like, for example, this is a concert that we did in Bangalore at the Bangalore Palace, where we had a couple of thousand people over there. This is a concert that we did at the India Gate for World Environment Day for the government of India. We had a few thousand people over there too. few other concerts. This was in Canada, where we performed to about 18 or 20,000 people over there in Surrey. Then performed at Mysore Palace. This was a beautiful concert, a concert that I'll always remember for the rest of my life. About 25,000 people over there. And all our music is about the environment. So we talk about environmental themes, but in a very, very entertaining fashion which people can consume easily. This is a concert we did at the Nehru Stadium in Chennai, where we did a concert to about, I think, 7,000 people in that particular stadium. Here you can see the audience over there. So that's basically the kind of concerts that we do. And I'll stop sharing my screen. Yeah. And now, what I would like to talk about is that, so what I do in my concerts, which are the ground up approach, where we perform to thousands of people. My largest audience is about 88,000 people, actually, being fortunate to perform to such large audiences, is that we try and, through the powerful music, we try to empower every single person that you can make a difference within your own lives. And that's all that you need to do. You don't need to bother much about other things. Of course, legislation is really important, and governments need to do their part, but we need to do our part equally, and we need to empower everybody to do their part. So, but when we talk about behavioral change, when it comes to climate change, everybody talks about that, nothing's going to happen because people are not going to change their behaviors. People are not going to stop using fossil fuels. People are not going to stop driving around in their cars. People are not going to stop flying in planes. Governments are not going to do anything because economy is so important. But if anything has been taught to us by this current pandemic, it is that if people are shown that they are in clear and imminent danger to themselves or to the people around them or to their loved ones or to their family, people are absolutely capable of strong behavioral change, and even governments are capable of making strong actions in a very short period of time, even if it goes against the economy, just to save people. So this pandemic has shown that. But at the end of the day, climate change is the biggest existential crisis, at least in my opinion. It's the biggest existential crisis that our human race has ever faced. And we need to acknowledge that. But then climate change is not being communicated well enough to the people that it is a very, very strong problem that we are going to be facing. So what I believe is that, on a lighter note, is that climate change needs to basically hire the PR agent of COVID and basically understand how to do their PR properly so that people understand that they have to bring about strong behavioral change. But what I hope that comes out of this pandemic is that people understand that behavioral change is not such a difficult thing to do, and it's not difficult to be responsible towards our planet and our environment. And we have to stop using money and finances as being the sole deciding factor as to what we can buy, what we can consume, and what we can waste. We have to, our deciding factor as to what we can consume, what we can buy, and what we can waste is basically how much the planet can afford rather than what we can financially afford. And that is what this pandemic will teach us, and I hope that it teaches us. So with that, I just wanted to say that, that meeting that I had with our Prime Minister, as I told you, which inspired me to make the album Shanti Samsara, which was launched at the Climate Change Conference. At that particular hour-long meeting, he told me something that really stuck in my head. He said that in order to purify the environment, we first have to purify the mind. And that is such a powerful statement, that in order to purify the environment, we first have to purify the mind. And that is why I'm so grateful to be speaking on this platform. Thank you, Rtambhara Wellness and the Embassy of Estonia, because Rtambhara Wellness is all about wellness. It's all about mindfulness. And in order to purify the environment, we first have to purify our own minds, and then the world will be saved. So thank you so much. And thank you for this opportunity. And I really hope to take some questions from you.
Thank you, Ricky, for your exciting journey of your life and giving us interesting talk. So I will be the moderator for the question and answer sessions. So I will just read out a few questions, and if you can just answer them. And I will request anyone who has got questions to post it in the chat and send it to everyone, and I will read it out. So the first question is, what have been your spiritual influences in your life? You seem to have gone into that direction now.
Okay, so for me, my only influence has been music and nature. And of course, a lot of people, like for example, I've been heavily inspired by Beethoven. not only because he is, in my opinion, the greatest composer that's ever lived, but also Beethoven has said at numerous occasions, and it's been recorded in history, that Beethoven was very heavily inspired by nature, and he would often go into nature and write his compositions. In fact, he's got a composition known as the Pastoral Symphony, which to me is one of the greatest compositions, in fact, the mother of all compositions that I've ever heard. And it's one of the lesser known compositions of his, because Pastoral is basically an ode to nature. And when you listen to the composition, you can actually feel that, that he's basically brought in the beauty of nature and the chaos within nature, within that composition. And every instance of that composition is just absolutely beautiful. So people like him have inspired me. Other leaders have inspired me. But to be honest, if I have to be very candid, I am basically an absolute atheist. And I also am not even a spiritual person, in the sense that for me, I just believe in things that are in front of me. So, so I know a lot of people will not agree with me, but that's the way that I've led my life. But at the same time, when people listen to my music, they feel that I'm spiritual because my music lends to that kind of a thought of spirituality and things like that. But I guess I'm spiritual through my music. So in that way, I'm a spiritual person because I believe in the power of music, and music is something that has guided my life. So, and nature is something that has guided my life. So, yeah. So basically, I hope that answers your question.
The next one is like, what genre influenced and inspired you, and which artist in particular?
So, so for me, the thing is that I've not been inspired by music, because I do not believe that music inspires my music. For me, it's always been other art forms. Like, for example, I watch a movie, I get inspired to make music, or I see a beautiful painting, I get inspired to make music, or I go into the forest and, I see something beautiful and I am inspired to make music, or a thought inspires me. Like, for example, I spoke about human and elephant conflict. I would encourage everybody to please go onto YouTube and check out my song about human and elephant conflict. It is called Love Divine. Love Divine. So please go and check it out. It's a song that that's a song. It's a song.
Sorry about that.
No problem. This happens. So you can check out the song Love Divine, which is about human and elephant conflict, which will explain to you what exactly happens during a human and elephant conflict. So anyway, so these are the things that actually inspire me. But at the same time, to answer your question more specifically, there are musicians who have inspired me, but not through their music, but through the way that they've led their lives. Like, for example, a huge influence on my life has been Pandit Ravi Shankar, the sitar player, simply because Pandit Ravi Shankar, he single-handedly made the sitar popular all over the world, and he opened the doors for musicians like me. So I believe that I exist as an international musician making Indian music simply because Pandit Ravi Shankar opened the door for us and all of us just squeezed through, So that's the thing. So Pandit Ravi Shankar has been a huge influence. And also the thing about him is that he's performed with so many artists all over the world, and seemingly pop artists from around the world, but he stuck true to his traditions when he was playing with these pop artists. Another musician would be Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, for the exact same reason that he, of course, for me, I believe that, again, this is my personal opinion, that I believe that his is the best and the most unique and the most, since you used the word spirituality earlier, the most divine voice ever in the history of human beings. Like, that's how much I love his voice. And I remember the first time that I listened to Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan's song. It was an album called Night Song. I listened to it in my 12th grade. And I remember listening to it, and I had never listened to Sufi music before this. And I listened to this voice, and I just had tears rolling down my face when I was listening to this voice. And it had such a profound effect on me, and I did not know what that effect. I wasn't feeling sad, but yet there were tears rolling down my face. And then that was the sort of moment I had in my life that, I want to be doing this to other people, So, I want to have this kind of an effect on other people, because music seems to be so powerful, and this gentleman seems to be so powerful with his voice. So that's basically some of the influences. And of course, since we're talking about India, Mr. A.R. Rahman, who I'm very proud to say is a friend of mine. But the thing about him is that since, I would say, the year 1992, when he released his film Roja, I would say without exception, every single singer, every single musician, every single composer in India has been influenced by him without exception. So that is his power over the musical landscape in India, and that's why I'm a huge admirer of him.
Good. Yeah. The next question is, you're a multifaceted person of immense talent. So what is this title, professor? What do you teach?
So thanks for asking that question. But the thing is that, I'm a professor at the National Institute of Advanced Studies at the Indian Institute of Science. It's a multidisciplinary, institution, which is present in the Indian Institute of Science. So what I teach, that's the question. Now, the thing is that, so what I do basically through my music is essentially, if you have to put it down in a pigeonhole, it's basically science communication. So I'm taking seemingly, complex thoughts and complex ideas like climate change and species extinction and pollution and all of that stuff. And I'm basically showcasing it in the most simplest fashion so that people will emotionally be moved by these messages and be moved to take action. Because at the end of the day, the question is always that everybody is aware of all these problems and everybody has got some degree of awareness on pretty much every single issue that we are facing on the planet. But how do we drive these people from awareness to action? So that is basically the question, And scientists have been doing it for a really long time. They've been trying to drive people from awareness to action because they have been doing so much of groundwork in creating all these papers and doing all this research and all of that stuff and trying to present it to the public. But how do we present it in a more emotional way so that the public basically grasps it and consumes it and creates action from all of this awareness? So anyway, coming to your question. So the National Institute of Advanced Studies used to have a professor who now passed away. Used to have a professor and the dean of the institute, a person called Professor Baldev. He had attended a few of my concerts, and then he came backstage one day and he just told me that, and he was the former head of the Baba Atomic Research Center. So he's a very decorated scientist with about something like 50 PhDs and all of that stuff. So he came backstage and he really honored me and he told me that, that what you're doing essentially is science communication. Why don't you become a professor at our university? So I said, yeah, that will make my parents finally proud of me, because I gave up the dental degree. So basically I became a professor at the National Institute of Advanced Studies, and what I talk about over there is basically science communication. So a very long answer to your short question.
There are some words of appreciation on your amazing pictures, and there's somebody saying you are an avatar Purush, Sir Ricky Cage. You are a huge talent, Ricky. All the best from Denzel. Then somebody from the renewable energy says, I'm in renewable energy and moving away from fossil fuels is a huge challenge with so much money tied up in it. What are the 17 sustainable challenges for the UN? If you can share a link, Vicky. So somebody wants some inputs.
So the thing is that about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, you can just run that on Google. Google is very, very populated with a whole lot of explanations of it. So just look for Sustainable Development Goals, or the short form SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, and everything will just show up over there. Because I think it's very important that every single person just goes through it, because you will know what are the goals, or rather what are the issues that we need these goals for, like in the sense that a lot of people ask, what can we do in our lives? And these goals will pretty much direct you as to what all of us can do within our lives to achieve the goals that our planet needs to achieve. And when it comes to fossil fuels, I absolutely agree with you that fossil fuels is going to be really, really difficult to get rid of, simply because there's so much of money tied into it, and there is infrastructural projects that are built on a daily basis, which is more and more making fossil fuels absolutely essential for governments and economies to exist pretty much. So that is where we have to come to about behavioral change. It needs to be a ground up approach. Like a few things that I can tell you about what I've done in my life is that I lead a very frugal life. I lead a really, really frugal life. I used to have 3 cars during my days when I was not a conscious living being or whatever. But right now I don't even own a car. So the only way I travel around is through public transportation in whichever country I'm in. So in Bangalore, for example, I use buses, I use the metro, and I use Ubers when I need to. But basically, I do not own a car. And I think people need to give up their cars right now, because it's not necessary to actually have a car. And I'm pretty sure that we'll have a day in the future where people will tell our grandchildren that we used to have a complete room for our car, where we used to store our car. That's how much a place we used to waste on it. But anyway, so that is something that that I do. The second thing is that I'm an aspiring vegan, but I'm a vegetarian. So I'm an aspiring vegan in the sense that in my home I'm a vegan, but outside of my home I am a vegetarian. Because of the amount that I used to travel. But of course, now with the pandemic, it's easier for me to be a vegan and to remain a vegan. But during my traveling days, I used to be in about 4 or 5 countries every month. Next thing is that since I travel a lot, I try to keep my carbon footprint low. So I get my carbon footprint evaluated every single quarter, right to a micro level of my concerts and my printing and my electricity usage, my transportation, my air travel, everything is completely audited as a carbon footprint. And every quarter, I offset my carbon footprint to lead a carbon negative lifestyle as much as possible. So that's what I do. And to reduce my carbon footprint, because I travel a lot, I used to travel a lot before the pandemic, I only travel economy because what I was told by these carbon footprint auditors is that a business class ticket is basically 5 times the carbon footprint of an economy class ticket simply because of the space usage and things like that. So for the last 4 years, I have not traveled a single time on a business class ticket. And as I told you, I travel to 4 or 5 countries every single month. And my band also, my musicians do not travel business class. Even if I'm offered a business class ticket, I do not take one. And and the last thing is that at any given point of time, I have only 11 sets of clothes. So I do not subscribe to fast fashion. You go to my Instagram, almost every post is me wearing the same clothes. And on stage, I only have 1 set of clothes. And once I wear out that 1 set of clothes, I buy another set of clothes. So basically that. So I do not subscribe to fast fashion. I only have a very, very, I buy good quality clothes, but I keep them for a really long time.
Good, thanks. Next is, it'll be great if these songs on environment are available in local languages so that these can be heard also by the rural kids.
I agree completely. So the Mayat songs, the songs for children that I spoke about, which are based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, they're currently available in Kannada and in Hindi. And we are looking at a couple of other languages. So international languages, we are doing French and Spanish, which is almost complete. We are also working on Tamil, we're working on Telugu, we're working on Marathi. So we are, and also Bengali. So we are working on these languages, but currently they are available on the internet for you to use as you like in any way possible in Kannada and in Hindi.
Good. The next is, there are many verses in the Upanishads which give us many more cryptic and deeply uniting slogans. Maybe you could come up with a fusion album with the original Upanishad verses.
I've already done that actually. So if you look at Shanti Samsara, there are a whole lot of verses from the Upanishads, a lot of strotams and all of that stuff which talk about coexistence, like talk about Gaja, which talks about Nadi, which talks about Vriksha, which talks about all these things. So basically, I would encourage you to listen to the album Shanti Samsara, or if you go onto Spotify, listen to Ricky Cage, the definitive edition. There is a whole lot of songs which are based on the Upanishads. But it's good that you mentioned about the Upanishads, because I would also like to talk about the Mahabharata. Because, even though I'm an atheist, as I mentioned, I read religious books from all over the world. I love reading philosophy. I love reading books on religion and understanding the times that they were written in. And the Mahabharata has got a really important verse which really stuck in my head, because I was in this conference, an environmental conference in New York, where we were talking about the tiger as a species, and everybody was talking about Save the Tiger. And there was one international conservationist from New York itself who said that, who told us what we all know, that when we talk about the tiger count, if the tiger count goes up in a particular forest, then it not only means that the tiger is healthy, but it also means the entire ecosystem is healthy, because the measure of the health of the species of a tiger and the growth of a tiger species means that everything is working within the ecosystem. The tiger has got enough prey to eat on, the prey has got enough foliage to eat, plus there is enough groundwater for everybody to drink water, plus there's not too much of human involvement. So basically the entire ecosystem is working if the tiger population goes up. And then I interrupted the guy and I told him that the Mahabharata, which was written about 5,000 years ago, actually says that the tiger cannot exist without the forest, and the forest cannot exist without the tiger. So that's the kind of ancient knowledge that we Indians have, and our entire knowledge and our entire traditions, our entire texts always has talked about coexistence. and coexistence with all species and with all entities living and non-living, as I said. And we need to go back to our roots and understand that that is what our culture is all about.
Someone is asking if you can play a piece of music from any of your album. I don't know whether
Unfortunately, on Zoom we cannot, but it's available on the internet, and please do listen to my music. I would be very happy if you do.
Another question is, what's your favorite nature spot in Bangalore and abroad that has inspired your work?
In Bangalore, basically, see, the thing is that I did, I don't know if some of you all have seen the movie, but I did the music, and I was quite involved in this movie called Wild Karnataka, which is a movie about the wildlife in Karnataka. I was very fortunate to compose the music for it. It was a film that we did with Sir David Attenborough. And so it was a huge honor to do this. It's available on Discovery Plus, and it's available on various online platforms for you to watch. It also had a theatrical release. It was released in theaters across India. So that particular film has got so much of pristine wildlife, and it's got so many beautiful animals. And the shocking part about that film is that every single species that is there in that film is just a 6 or 7 hour drive away from my home. You know, and that is how much of beauty that we have in a country. And that's why I love our country, simply because in our country is one of the very few countries which still has big mammals walking around, you know, like elephants and, you know, and tigers and things like that, because we've lived in coexistence with our forests and wildlife, as I mentioned, for the longest period of time. And we revere our forests and wildlife. Abroad, I would say that there are a whole, like for example, the Yellowstone Park, the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, a bunch of other places, you know, which I absolutely love when it comes to nature spots.
So one question is, what are the 2 things you would suggest that people should adopt in their lives for a more environment-friendly lifestyle? It's a question from Harshvardhan.
So the obvious thing would be about single-use plastics. Try and reduce as much as possible your consumption of single-use plastics. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes it's not convenient. Sometimes the economics does not work out. So basically, I would just suggest that, like, you know, reduce the single-use plastics to as much as possible. And also, I'm sure that, you know, that this is something that the pandemic also taught me, and I'm sure it's taught a lot of you about how to reduce your waste and how to reduce your garbage, you know. Because for me, it really taught me a lesson, because I've been trying to live as consciously as possible, but this pandemic really taught me that, you know, I'm generating so much of garbage, and that's crazy, you know. And then I started like learning ways how to reduce that garbage and how to reuse instead of throwing away things. So that would be one thing. And the second thing would be, as much as possible, to try to reduce your dependence on fossil fuels, whether it is using a car or whether it is using public transportation, or whether it's cycling or just not traveling, you know, and just doing, you know, Zoom, meetings and things like that. So I would say that reduce your dependence on fossil fuels as much as possible. So I would say that these 2 things would be the most immediate things.
Thanks. There's one Ramohan Menon who is listening to this talk from his bed. He's down with corona. So,
wish you my best. Yeah.
Wellness and happiness, he says, goes hand in hand along with music. So he keeps listening to music the whole day. So we wish him good luck to recover soon. Another question is, what is the most inspirational experience you have had in your life to date?
Inspirational experience. Actually, quite a few of them, actually. One would be the incident that I just narrated in my talk about, you know, listening to Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan's music. Then I would say, like, you know, the climate change conference that I spoke about, the COP21, simply because it's quite inspiring to see that, 195 countries coming together with huge differences, because a lot of these countries are on opposing ends of the political spectrum. A lot of these countries are not even talking to each other. A lot of these countries are not cooperating with each other, suspicious of each other. But all of these countries coming together in 2015 in November, you know, for the singular purpose of understanding that, you know, that we need to create a better future for our future generations. And, so that itself was very, very inspiring to just look at that room with all these world leaders and to understand that all of them are there for the singular purpose of understanding that we all need to work together because all of us are in this together.
A lot of people would love to listen to your music. Like you mentioned, they can see it from the online.
Yeah, hopefully I'll see a boost in my listenership after this.
Yeah. One question is, can you name the different topics on which your music is based? And are all your musicians from India?
So yeah, my music is primarily Indian for sure, but I collaborate with musicians all over the world. Like as I mentioned for my album Shanti Samsara, I collaborated with musicians, that there's 500 musicians from over 40 countries. So I do collaborate with musicians from all over the world, but I would say my musician I would say the soul of my music is definitely Indian. And it's always going to be Indian because I express myself through Indian music, being an Indian person and being a person who has lived in India for pretty much all my life. So I always express myself through Indian music. And what was the second part of the question?
Are all your musicians from India?
Yeah. So yeah, so my musicians are from different parts of the world for sure.
It's covered. Yeah. One comment is you really are a modern day sadhu. Keep it up. Agriculture is important for economy. Have you made a music album for the encouragement of farmers? They are the backbone of Indian economy.
Yes, there is a song you can check on YouTube. It's called the One with Earth song. It is dedicated to farmers, especially to farmers in India, the One with Earth song. Now, this particular song is very interesting how it was created. Now, there is this movement in Andhra Pradesh. It's known as Zero Budget Natural Farming. In short, it is ZBNF. It was sort of like something that was started by the Andhra Pradesh government, by United Nations Environment Program, and by the World Bank. So basically, these people came together and they started this thing known as the Zero Budget Natural Farming movement. And I had the pleasure of going over there and checking it out. So this particular movement is basically it's spearheaded by the tribal farmers of the region, especially in Araku Valley and Visakhapatnam, where farmers are transitioning away from using pesticides, chemicals, and fertilizers. So this particular farming method does not use, is a farming method which is zero pesticides, zero chemicals, zero fertilizer, and uses the most natural ingredients and zero GMO, and uses the most natural ingredients in farming. So basically going to the age-old techniques of farming. So it was very inspiring for me to be there, and these tribal farmers have got songs that have been passed down from generation to generation, songs that are a few thousand years old, and all these songs are about nature and about natural living. So I collaborated with these farmers, with these tribal farmers. I got them to sing for me. I recorded them, and I made this song, the One with Earth song, which is a tribute to them. So talking about the zero budget natural farming technique, the aim of all these organizations is to transition 6 million farmers and 8 million hectares of land by 2030 into zero budget and natural farming. And currently there are 650,000 farmers in Andhra Pradesh that are practicing this particular method. So I would encourage you to read about this method, that is zero budget natural farming, and also listen to this song, that is the One with Earth song, on YouTube, to understand this particular farming method, and to even look at the farmers who are actually practicing this farming method.
Thank you. I think that covers some of the questions. I think we're running short of time. So I think we have come to the end of the questions. So thank you so much, Your Excellency, Ms. Catherine Kivy, for honoring Rtambhara Wellness as a chief guest, and Ricky Cage for delivering the talk on music for healthy people and healthy planet. May I now request Ms. Barbara Disjarovich to present the vote of thanks. Barbara Disjarovich is a yoga instructor from the Himalayan School of Traditional Yoga and lives in Serbia. She is the global leader of Mohanji Youth Club, which practices Mohanji transformation method, which is a healing technique. So over to you, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again for your presence and your participation today from all of us at Rtambhara. I'm sure this interesting talk presented by Mr. Ricky Cage has inspired all of us to understand that the medium of music creates an inner harmony, and when we all together echo the same emotions from our hearts, then sound flows like soothing music, which is so healing to our environment. We wholeheartedly express our deep gratitude to Her Excellency Ms. Catherine Kivy and all excellencies representing different countries, and our distinguished guests for your valuable presence. We look forward to your presence every week on Tuesdays and Fridays, where Rtambhara brings to you interesting topics on holistic wellness, delivered by a host of knowledgeable speakers. Thank you once again. And with all the good takeaways, the great takeaways, we conclude today's session.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine ji.